Not where we need to be. On Friday, we've come into this conference trying to keep 1.5 alive, and whilst we've had some really great ambition at the beginning of this conference and some really warm words that are welcome, it's not enough yet. So I think it's time to pause, take a breath, go back to the drawing board and figure out what we can do to really up that ambition and keep that 1.5 alive.
So this is a concern not so much about the mid-century targets, these net zero targets, but about what's happening to emissions in the next 10 years that really changes that trajectory.
That's absolutely spot on. It's about action now. It's about the leaders of today, and that's political leaders, it's around CEOs. It's those leaders that can make a difference. The power is in their hands. So what they choose to do now will put us on that trajectory or not. That window of opportunity is closing.
A lot of people might say that there have been many different climate projections in the last few decades, some of which have been accurate, some of which have been less accurate. This seems to be a particularly pessimistic piece of analysis. To what extent should we be listening so much and believing so much in analyses that have not always been so accurate in the past?
I think there's two things here. One is we got issued in the summer with a code red for humanity. Now, scientists aren't really the type of people that come out shouting from the rooftops, and they all came together and said this is a code red for humanity. That's the backdrop of which we face. The analysis that's out today in terms of what the actions are and what they add up to is slightly different, and you're right, there's different scenarios of what will happen. But let's be honest, we haven't as yet really delivered. So I think we have to go in and have an honest assessment of where we are and look at how we can up that ambition and keep that 1.5 alive.
There was a report out from the Pentagon in the middle of the last century that suggested that the UK climate would be Siberian by 2020. That didn't exactly pan out. There were others that suggested that sea rise would be meteoric by now. That also hasn't panned out. One suggestion even at the early 2000s that the ice caps would be gone by this year. Do we need to have a little bit more faith in the sort of ingenuity and innovative nature of this world, and potentially these more disaster-style scenarios are not all that likely?
I think, what I said, we are issued with a code red for humanity from all of the scientists across the world. The science of this is unbelievably strong in terms of what's going to happen. And also we're feeling those impacts today. We've seen turtles freezing over in Texas. You know, we've seen koalas being burned to death in the Australian wildfires. We've seen flooding happen in Europe, in China, across the globe. We're seeing those impacts. And the Northwest, in terms of Canada, you know, we had our first wet bulb moment ever. So in terms of those impacts are here today. We need to listen to the science and to the scientists and take action to make sure, as I say, we keep that 1.5 alive. And 1.5 is not a safe landing zone for us. There still is impacts. At WWF, at 1.5 we lose 70% of our coral reefs. At 2 degrees we lose everything.
To what extent is this what world leaders need to do? Is this what politicians need to do? Or are there other solutions to this? I mean, if we're talking about, for example, lab-grown meat replacing a lot of the sort of farming meat that is delivered right now, that could cut down CO2 enormously. Different private innovations with regard to microorganisms that eat up CO2 and eat up methane. All of these things could be right around the corner. Is that something that we need to look at too?
I think what we need to do is make sure leaders are in a position to set that framework, to make sure that businesses and for citizens to be able to do the right thing in terms of their environmental impact, which we know is what consumers want to do. In terms of those technical fixes, by all means, let's keep going and keep looking. We're going to need all the tools in our kit bag, but let's also not get distracted. As we said, that window of opportunity is narrowing. We've got a lot of the solutions right here, right now. It's just about boldness, ambition and courage to do the right thing.
Do you think that Boris Johnson perhaps thinks that things aren't moving quickly enough? Of course, he's hurtling back on a train in the middle of this week to maybe try and chivvy on these negotiations. Is that potentially, is the Prime Minister thinking along your wavelength?
I think the Prime Minister, you know, has put himself up. He's made sure this is the beacon conference for the UK. This is our first step on the global stage. You know, this is a key part of global Britain. So it is, I'm sure, within his desires and interests to make sure it's a success. I think him coming back and trying to put that ambition back on the table should be a good thing.
And we were just discussing a second or two ago that we were talking about those Paris 5-year COPs. Every 5 years there's supposed to be some large, big agreement that sort of moves things forward. There are now some suggestions that this might be curtailed to every 3 years, that action must happen faster and faster. What do you say to that?
I think we would welcome coming back to the table sooner. We want to have more ambition. Those numbers out today are a real concern, and we want to make sure that landing zone is still within reach. So I think coming back to the table earlier would be a good thing. And whether it's next year or in 2 years around this global stocktake moment, which could be a good time to ratchet up ambition, we'll also see that hopefully we'll have more delivery. And so that backdrop of action should hopefully create an ambition loop and get countries and leaders to move faster.
And just finally, we know we're in the bit of a mid-conference lull at the moment. Lots of people wondering what's going on. When do we expect an agreement, if one at all is going to be reached? When do we expect that to be coming out?
I think there's going to be lots of texts coming out over the week. Traditionally, the UNFCCC negotiations have gone on very late in the day, and it has often been in the early hours of the morning, with a Friday night close. But let's hope we can bring that forward, because I think after 2 weeks, everybody's keen for a bold agreement to be done on time and within the framework we're all looking for.